Hello everyone, welcome back to the table. What I'm going to do today is not quite an unboxing. I already did an unboxing, so by the time you see this is going to be more of a detailed component overview, kind of explain to you what the pieces are. See, like in the unboxing, yes, I pulled stuff out, said here's a tile and things like that, but now that I've played the game a few times, I can come back and maybe explain a little more in detail what the pieces are, what they're used for. That way you can kind of see for yourself if this is of interest to you. Okay, more of an informed unboxing. Now, after I've separated the components, I've left all of the soldiers in their respective baggies that they came in, just to kind of help keep all the bits and pieces together. We'll open up a soldier, take a look at what comes with them and why I'm keeping them in their baggie. And then we'll kind of look at some of the different components here. Basically, I'll just start with this. Let's take a look at this bag. Okay, you have markers, right? In most games you have markers. Now, with the little bit of play that my son and I have done so far, we haven't used all of the markers. These move markers, for instance, let's go ahead and pull out a couple of these move markers. These are a little more common. Some of these other markers I'm sure are going to come up in play, but the ones that we use out of here for now, though, are these move markers. Now, these are important because the way the game is set up is when you move, I'm talking about here, when you move, you don't pay the cost of move to go into a square. So all of these are going to be called squares, essentially. Now, what you do is you have to pay the cost to leave a square. Now, if I am able to fit one or two of these together, I might be able to kind of show you here. Alright, the terrain doesn't line up, apologies. But let's say I have a person here. I'm going to grab a soldier. I've got Kruger here in the apple orchard. This is actually, this L indicates as part of a landmark, and the landmark is comprised of 4 squares, but for just talking about it here, we're going to look right here at the apple orchard. And to make that a little easier, let's zoom in just a little bit and get him. Alright, so what we have here is all of these terrain pieces, not all of them, but squares that have important terrain elements are going to have modifiers if it modifies your look ability, your height ability, your ability to shoot, or move. In this case, that's where these move tiles come in. Now, when you move, I'm going to see if I can grab just another landmark here. Ignore that part. What I want to show you is, oh look, I just grabbed 4 and they all fit together nice. Normally when you move, most of the time you can move either left, right, up, down kind of a deal. Easy. But if you want to move diagonally, there are certain conditions that will prevent you from moving diagonally. In the rule book, there's this little handy dandy chart that says if your terrain piece has a move S or a move R, there's a move T, but it's not used in the base game. From what I'm gathering, that's T for tracks. Like if you get the Seargeants Hell on Wheel expansion, there might be certain terrain elements that restrict the movement of vehicles. But here we've got an S. So in this handy dandy chart in the book, it says that if you want to move diagonally, you can, but you have to pay a certain move cost. And that's where these move tokens come in. So depending on the terrain type that you're trying to move from, you might have to have a move plus or a move plus plus. Now, that doesn't mean you move additional squares with that. That just means you've saved up enough move points that you could move from that square in the direction you try to go. Most of the time, I've seen that restriction is more for if you're trying to go diagonally. So if I wanted to move out of this S without pulling the rule book out, well, I guess I could, since we're talking about it. See if we can find a handy dandy little chart here. Now that I've got the camera zoomed way in for you, I might have to zoom it out just so you can see the little chart. There it is. So where are we at here? Right, so the type of movement, so I've got the move S. If I'm going to move a corner, I have to have a plus. If I have a terrain with a move R and I want to move off the corner, which is like the diagonal, then I would need a move plus plus. So the way you get that is you're going to bank move points. All of your soldiers have move points. Most of them have one movement point. So it would actually take a couple turns of a soldier banking up move points to gain a move plus or move plus plus. All right. Once they have the appropriate amount of pluses, then they can move in that direction that the chart indicated for their restrictions. So that's what those tokens are for. Now, there's some other tokens here, like I said, we haven't used yet. So I'm not going to speculate too much on those. I think there is like a smoke and then fire markers, which would indicate, you know, where smoke and fire are. But we haven't played a scenario where we've needed those. And then some of these other markers we haven't used. Now, there are some other markers that you have. So I'll just grab out a couple here. Okay, the VP markers should be somewhat explanatory. There will be certain scenario conditions that you can meet, possibly actions on cards, that if you complete the action, you get victory points. And that's what it's all about, is finding ways to earn victory points, so when the game is over, who's ever got the most victory points wins, is the basics of it. So we got a bunch of victory point markers. Then you have your grenades, which indicate exactly that. When you purchase grenades, you can have these with your soldier card to know how many grenades they have. Then on the flip side, it's also got your pin to let you know. It's one of your combat results that you can get as a pin. Now, the one thing, I believe they only get one pin. Now, that might make sense to a lot of folks. The only reason why that was kind of a source of me to look up is I play games where you can actually accrue multiple pin markers on things, and then if you're going to rally people, you have to rally all the pins to get them back at their full fighting condition. However, in this game, I believe if you get a pin result, you just stick one pin and they only become pinned once, and what that does then is all of their stats kind of get reduced by half and rounding down, which actually can make a very big difference when trying to spot, when trying to shoot at other targets, and then rallying people is a chore in itself. So a pin result can be pretty devastating. All right, but that's really it for the pins. Just a few game markers, markers for grenades. There's the stick grenades, pineapple grenades for like the Americans, and then some victory point markers. So not a super heavy marker counter type of game. Great, that's fine. Now you also have here, each player is going to have, basically I almost call it like a command deck. Let me zoom out a little bit. So every player has an action deck, and you've got this little fold out that what you'll do is you'll place your action deck here, and then just follow the name, right? Discard and victory points. And then as you use your action cards, you just move them over to the discard pile. Now your action deck is made up of the soldiers that you bring. You might include some cards from scenarios, but most of the time you build your action deck from the soldiers that you purchase or bring or provided by the scenario. So the more soldiers you have, the bigger the action deck you have. Now, the size of the action deck really isn't that important, because if you run out of cards, you just simply reshuffle the action deck and make a new draw pile, which is nice because in some games that's a big deal. Either that signals the end of a turn, or there's penalties because you ran out of cards, things like that. This keeps it very simple. You just reshuffle that deck and boom, you move on. Now the other thing that you use here for your playmat, your action playmat, is you're going to put down an action card based on each phase of the game that you play. Now that's important because you have story cards. Now I'll show you one other component here as I talk away from the mic. This drives the story. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull out here two decks that come with the base game. These are the cards that drive the story. So beyond just being a card-driven type of skirmish game, there's also kind of a story that goes with each scenario, and that can be driven by the cards. So I'll go ahead and pull some cards out for you. When you play a scenario, it's going to tell you which action cards to use. The story part comes from the fact that, let me grab these. I've got these already separated out for scenario 1, so I'm just going to set those there. The story part comes from these events that can happen down on each card. Now, when you have your action card, well, story deck set up based on the scenario, when you start a turn, what you do is you're going to draw from the story pile and stick it out here according to the phases of a turn. There's going to be 3 phases in each turn. What you're looking to see is if these events match up down here at the bottom. So what you do is you look at this symbol on the right hand side which says weather, which would be the right hand element or left hand element of the next card over. If those match, that's going to trigger the event. Okay, so for example here, none of those are going to make a good match. So let me find purple. I got a lot of purple here. There's a people. Lots of landmark ones here. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I pulled out mostly of the landmark ones. So I think that's pretty much all that's left. Well, what I mean by that is each of these colors represent a type of event. So like these are terrain events for the green, purple events for this kind of a pinkish, reddish, fleshy color, gray for weird events. There's ordnance for these orange, weather events blue. Now landmark are going to be tied to like those landmark tiles I mentioned where it takes like 4 squares to make up a landmark. That could be a house, church, pasture, orchard, and there are actually certain story cards that will tie into those specific landmarks. So if I'm not playing with the graveyard, I pull all the graveyard related cards out of my story deck. That way as I'm laying out these cards, I'm not going to encounter things that, you know, require the use of the graveyard. And that's what the scenario tells you to pull out. So I think these are mostly all the landmarks that were removed. So what I'm going to do is grab the chapter 1 cards here for scenario 1. I might be able to lay something out here, get you an actual example. So when you set your game up, you're going to shuffle your story deck and you're going to lay out phases 1, 2, and 3. You know, you just pull it right off the deck and lay it out. I am flipping through the deck, cheating, because I want to lay some things out to show you what these events might look like. I'm going to see if I have a weird down here at the bottom. I do. Alright, so here's where the narrative story part of the game comes in. If you've played a game like Combat Commander, actually a lot of games that have random events, that's essentially what this is down here at the bottom. But the reason why this can be kind of a narrative story is the fact that these can tie into specific landmarks that come in your game, which is kind of neat. And then some of that is tied to characters. So there might be something that says, hey, if Private so-and-so is on the map and he's near this particular landmark, that triggers a special event. So it truly is going to make every gameplay you do different because there's no guarantee that you're ever going to get matchups down below. Now what that means is in a turn you could potentially have up to 2 special events that happen. There's never going to be an event that triggers on the first phase because there's never a card over here to trigger it. So you're always going to have phase potentially 2 and 3 that have an event. So for example here, we got a landmark matchup. So when phase 2 comes, you always resolve the random event before you do the rest of the turn. So we would look here. See, for example, this is tied to landmark 1B, the pasture. The highest serial number soldier closest to the pasture finds map case, gain 5 victory points. Okay, nothing groundbreaking, but trust me, 5 victory points could be a big deal. Then on phase 3, if this is what we laid out, boom, we get a weird event. It says, an old woman yells at the soldiers to go away. All soldiers become spotted. Great. That's a fantastic thing. So apparently we come across an old woman, she yells, and it says, all soldiers become spotted. Now, that would mean, how I read that, every single soldier on the board now becomes spotted. Let me tell you, that would be tremendously powerful. In the game, when I've been playing with my son, hidden units are so vital because they can't be shot at. Now, if you shoot, of course, that would put you in a spotted mode, but what's nice is when you don't have initiative, and the initiative player runs like a shoot action, there's nobody to shoot at, and then you losing initiative get to come and pop up and shoot people. It's like a free shot. It's nice. So having someone spot all the soldiers is weird. Now, well, that's why it's a weird event. With the map, though, you might say, but Eddie, a map is big. How could this one old woman yell at you and expose everybody on the map? These squares are like 2 meters, so about 6 feet, I think is what it said. They're not that big. The squares are not that big. The buildings aren't that big. The trees aren't big forests or anything like that. You're talking very close battle conditions where if I'm at the, like scenario 1, for example, you're like maybe 5 squares away from someone, that's 10 meters, that's like 30 feet. That's really, really close. Like, you can hear people moving and doing things. It's so an old woman yelling at everybody to get off her property, I guess, you're going to see people react to that. So that's another interesting aspect of the game, is the scale. You are close in. So even if you have a map that's quite a few squares big, it really is not that far. You know, it's like shooting from one end of my house to the other end of the house, and ish, not quite that long, but my house isn't that big. But I'm just saying, it's very cramped in your battle space. The larger maps do spread it out a little bit more, but in essence, again, we're talking just a few people on each side. They're not that far apart from each other. So it's a very interesting scale that you're playing at, and the random events really tie into the map very, very well. All right, so that's your story mat. That's your story cards. The basic game comes with 2 of these decks. So as you progress through the scenarios, you'll be removing certain landmark cards, adding some, just all based on your scenario and what you have to fight around. And again, I think they've done a fantastic job of integrating all these things together. That was something I was reading on the forums, that, I mean, again, with the fact that you're going to get unique soldiers, the serial numbers on the soldiers are 6 numbers, so they can go potentially up to 999,999 unique soldiers. That's like 1 million people. That's a very big army. I know a lot of people talk about a 1,000,000-man army and whatnot. They have kind of created a 1,000,000-man army. I don't know how many soldiers they've actually have gone through yet and created names and stats for. But let's talk about a soldier now, since we mentioned that. Let me move this. Well, here, there's one more play aid. Speaking of soldiers, I'll grab this right now. Again, it's a fold out. And when you have your soldier, you can put your soldier card here to keep track of your squad. Alright, so how do you make a squad? Well, I'm going to grab a soldier right here. That was packed. Oh, I didn't say who packed, but this is a rifle sergeant. Who is this? Oh, Xavier. I don't think I've played with Xavier. I may have already. Alright, so here's a few things when you get your typical soldier here. First is the soldier card. So let's take a look at what makes a soldier. I'm going to lay it down here. We're going to zoom in. Zoomity zoom. Try not to give you whiplash here on the zoom. Alright. Quite a few pieces of information from your soldier, but they're all very important. One is you've got like their rank, you have their name. This is a M1 rifle that he's got. Now, to the nitty-gritties, you have a look box, so that's important when you need to spot people. Now, another thing that this does is it gives you additional cards that you draw at the beginning of your turn. So when you start a turn, the scenario would give you a base number of cards that you draw from your action deck, which is typically 3 unless the scenario specifies otherwise. Then you look at your soldiers, and in their look box, if they have an additional draw, or if there's some other card or something that you have that gives you additional draws, you draw that many more cards from your action deck. Now, that's important for a couple things. One, that will determine your initiative. When the game plays, like if I grab this here, now that I'm zoomed in, let me zoom out so you can see what I'm talking about here. When I have my soldier and I've got his cards, these are the soldier cards. The soldier cards are what go in. Let me just set Xavier there for a side. Here's the other one. Yep, Xavier. There's several flavors of Xavier. I got him as a private, I got his corporal version, and I've got his sergeant first class version. And then he's got related cards to the fact that he's a leader of some sort. And then based on what version I'm playing, if I'm playing the corporal version, I'm going to put in his corporal card, but I wouldn't need to put in his private card. Or there's like, it should be some sergeant first class card, right? So if I'm playing the sergeant first class version of him, I would put in the sergeant first class cards, but I could leave out the corporal cards. But that's basically how you build a deck, is each soldier comes with a certain amount of cards assigned to them. And you put that here, if I fold this out, where we mentioned that, to this action deck. So when you start a turn, you draw your 3 cards, which is usually base for a scenario, and then inside the look box or whatever other modifier you have, you draw additional cards. So he says I could draw 4 more cards. Well, 3, that's going to give me a starting hand of 7. So that does 2 things for me. After I put down a card I want to do for the phase, so I'm just going to lay down some cards here. Whatever I don't play, they actually get left in your hand, and this is how you determine initiative. The player that has the most cards left in their hand after paying for their phases, they have initiative. That's very important. The other reason why it's kind of good to have a lot of cards in your hand is potentially you're going to draw actions that match the story card actions. All right, I'll show you what that means in just a moment, but basically each turn you're going to draw cards to make up your hand based on the soldiers you've included and the cards that each soldier brings with them. So if you've got 2 soldiers, you're going to potentially have a much bigger draw deck than, say, a single soldier. Or if you have 5 soldiers, you're going to have quite a few cards to pull from, which is good to have that variety. These cards also dictate everything from combat results to damage checks to orders that you can do. So let's finish taking a look at the soldier card, then we'll look at the supporting cards that make them up. I'm going to zoom back in for just a moment. Now if this video seems like I'm jumping around from point to point, I'll apologize, because I am. I didn't plan this out. I was just excited to show you this. So if you end up with questions about the game further, put them in the comments. I'll see if I can answer them or guide you towards answers, just in case this is a little too hectic for you. Okay, so now that's your look box. Then soldiers have a hide ability. Now this guy here has hold. He can actually take a card from his hand that's left over, and he can actually hold it under him. That way on another turn, I could take that card out and stick it into my action hand. And again, that's important because that could help build your potential initiative, or just give you more options to help you match up with the story actions. He can rally 4 men. Rally is an important ability that lets you remove pin status from a certain amount of soldiers, in his case 4. Now there are restrictions. You can rally up to 2 squares away. If he was pinned, he would have to rally himself, and then in that same rally he could only rally up to 1 square away. Alright, so a lot of times if you have like a dog tag action, you might have the leader rally himself first, and then if you had a bubble action for rallying people, then you could try to rally people up to 2 squares away. There's a lot of thinking that goes into the game, but that's what rally does, is he can remove pins from soldiers. Cover, this is how well he can hide himself from the enemy. You want a low cover score, so cover of 4 is pretty good. The Germans in the base set, they so far all the Germans we've encountered, they don't have very good cover scores. They're averaging around 6. The Americans average around 4. I had a guy I used as my sniper with a cover of 3, which was fantastic. So you want a low cover score. Shooting, how many squares you can shoot away effectively. So there's a long category, short range, close range. Then there's a toss for how far you can throw grenades. Use, hit. I guess they all say use, hit, toss, use, hit. Anyway, then there's your move. So again, like I said, most of these folks only walk one square, but then he can equip 5 cards and fight 2 cards. Now, equip 5 cards, instead of buying soldiers with your points, each scenario usually says how many points you have to buy men and equipment. You could just buy a bunch of equipment. So if I wanted to, I could take the points of my mission, have old Javier here, and just load him out and Rambo the game. Might not be very good because 1 kill card and they're gone. So, but I could equip him with quite a few pieces of gear. The other thing on here then is his dog tag and his number. This can also be used towards initiative. If 2 players have left over, let's say after they play their action cards for the phases, and they have like 3 cards in their hand left over each, that's a tied initiative. What you then do is you see who's got the highest victory points on the board. They'll be the initiative player. If you tie on that, then you check to see who's got the lowest serial number, and that should resolve most issues. Because again, if everybody's unique, there should not be any duplicated serial numbers, so usually somebody will have a low number. Also, the dog tag is good because there's some bits and pieces that you have with your soldier beyond just their unit card and their cards. You have the option to use standees, which this one isn't assembled here. He's actually just kind of fallen out of his package. Oh no, he was assembled. I guess I used him. But you can assemble your standee like so. If I can get this guy back in here. There we go. It's not terrible at all. They got a good, nice little drawing of the soldier there, little American flag to remind you. It's got 2 pieces that make up a nice little thick base to hold everything up, and it's got the matching dog tag number and the name. And then boom, you put them down there. Then also you have the hidden version. So on one side lets you know that that's an American hidden token moving around the map, and then the player who owns him can look every once in a while to remind himself that that's Javier. Then if you play with miniatures, they've also included a nice little pad that you could stick your 10mm figure on and use that instead of the punch-out standee. So if you don't have any miniatures, you can use the standee and then replace them out as you get miniatures. So another very cool aspect of your soldier on your board. Now let's take a look at the card. So we already know Javier comes with 3 flavors, so we're going to stick those there. He also comes with some cards, and again, some of those cards will be based on the rank of Javier that you pick. So if I didn't pick Sergeant First Class version of Javier, I would not put that in my draw deck, but I would keep the Corporal version. Don't need the private version, don't need that version. This means it's like a base card that everybody gets when you got this little symbol there. So I'm going to keep those. Not the private version. Not that one. I'm keeping the Corporal version. Okay. So I've created my deck now. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Might be a little easier to see these cards now as I hold them. Alright, now that I've got my deck for Corporal Javier in this case, all the cards come in the basic components here. So 1, this tells you the basic action that you can take with this card. This is usually called the dog tag action because this action up here in this corner, and you notice that all these action cards have that. So if you're familiar with like Combat Commander, this is what this is. It's your command that you're allowed to do. I can do a hide command. I could shoot with this card, I can move with this card, or look with this card. And when I shuffle this up, and I'm drawing my hand, they just come up random, and I know, okay, great, I've got a hide. Then I can know that Javier specifically could do a hide. Now, this is important because when you are playing down cards to play to match up the story, you want to make sure that if I've happen to have 2 different soldiers in my hand, like if I have a card for Javier and then I have a card for, say, someone named Harper, if I don't have Harper on the board but I have Xavier on the board, I would want to make sure that I play down the card corresponding to Xavier. That way I could execute this singular action. Now, what if you drew a card and nobody with a matching dog tag was on the board? Well, fear not, you can still do stuff because most of these cards come with the action bubble. And the action bubble will let you activate other people even if that dog tag person isn't on the board. So for example, with this card, I could play it to meet the requirements of the story hide phase. But if Javier wasn't here, or Xavier wasn't here, and I didn't want to do a hide, I could still move 3 soldiers. 3 soldiers take cover. Well, that's not a move, that's take cover, for instance. What are some other things we could do here? Let's look at the bubble. Try not to mix these up too much. Shuffle them at some point. 3 soldiers may sight an enemy, I could do. 3 soldiers may shoot. 1 soldier may shoot. 3 soldiers may move and move again. Wow, that's amazing. Now, the nice thing too with this team bubble is this soldier can also be activated by the team bubble. So that means, like if I have this shoot, for example, I can have Xavier shoot using his dog tag action because he's on the board and his action is shoot. Then he could also shoot because the bubble says you can have 1 soldier may shoot. What this does is this allows you to set up like heroes. You know, every once in a while a soldier may rise to the occasion and do things above and beyond. So that's kind of a neat. This game has a lot of cool aspects of, you know, creating heroes and things like that. Just all based within the narrative of the cards. Now, just because you say this guy acted twice and he's a hero, there's not like a hero mechanic. It just means this guy at that moment, adrenaline-wise, did all the right stuff at the right time. Let me fix something here. I knocked over my power supply here. So one second. I'm going to try not to knock a bunch of stuff over here while I adjust this. Should be good. All right. So you're going to have your singular action matched to a dog tag. If that dog tag guy isn't there, you can do an actions here based on the team bubble. Now, one other card item you have, potentially, I saw it here. Oh, I thought I saw it. It must be on one of these other ones here. Sometimes there's an additional box action. Oh, I swear I thought this guy had one. Yeah, right there. Xavier may rally. So Xavier, on this particular card, Xavier might be a real American hero because it's an American soldier. He might be able to do a look action because that's his dog tag action. He might be able to include himself with an opportunity to do another sight action because of the team bubble. And he may rally. He could attempt to rally if he needed to, because he's got this. Now, this here could come in a blue color, which is a mandatory. You have to do if you can do it. But if that little action is here in a white box, then you may do it if you can and you want to. Some of the blues, though, you have to try and resolve. Okay, so that's how you issue orders to people. So you're going to draw the cards, lay them out as best you can. And again, I'm going to show you how you match that up against the story, because the story will determine what actions you can play. Unlike a lot of card-driven games where if I have a move, you can't just play a move down to your board and say, I'm moving that guy this phase. You're still limited by what the story will allow you to do. And we'll show you how you match that up. The last things you need to know, though, about these action cards is this is how you determine if you shoot targets or take damage. So, for instance, if I'm going to shoot somebody, I was going to make sure I didn't put the soldiers back in here. I think we're good. I think we're okay. All right, so for instance, if I'm going to shoot at somebody, once I've determined if I can shoot at long range or short range, essentially your soldier here, it says my long is 12 squares. So I can shoot out to 12 squares. Anything within that 12 squares between my short range of 5 and 12 of long, that's long range. Then, based on the terrain, which has penalty, if there are penalties to shooting, that reduces how far I can effectively shoot. So if there's a bush between me and the enemy that's a -2 bush, then that means my long range would be 10 squares, short range is 3 squares, and close range would be 0 squares. So once I've determined my distance, I then flip a card. So let's say I can shoot, basically you shoot every band that you're out and above. So for example, if let's say my target was 3 squares away, 3 is outside of close, but it's less than short and it's less than long. So I would hit targets on short range and long range. I explained that rather quickly. You can rewind if you want, go back a little bit and see that again. But one of these days we'll do a gameplay and we'll explain it there a little bit better. But what's important to know is when I shoot somebody, I have to draw a card from the action deck, stick it in the discard, and I look to see if under long and short, if it says hit or miss, or if I'm at close range, a miss, or if I threw a grenade for a blast, if it's a hit. And that will tell me basically how good my shot was. Then, that's what the attacker does. The defender, let's say I just got shot. Well, then what I got to do is draw the top card of my action deck, flip it, and then right down here in the lower right, it gives me the damage result, which means if somebody was shooting at Xavier and scored one hit, and I flip the card and it says kill, he's killed. That easy. As you see here, the other possible damage results are wound. You also have the pin we were talking about, where it reduces your stats by half. There's also one in here called a zip. Well, I tell you what, old Xavier here has no zips in his deck. It's all pins, kills, and wounds. Wound means you flip the soldier over to his wounded side. His stats are dropped a little bit. Sometimes you don't even really see a difference. But he'll play on this reduced side, and if he takes another wound, he dies. I don't have a zip card, but a zip just means it was a complete miss. So even though you scored a hit, he dived out of the way at the last second, and the zip means the bullet ultimately missed. That's the basics of your soldier card and your action deck. But remember I said you cannot, when you're setting out your phases, you can't just play whatever card for whatever soldier you want. You're limited by what you can play based on what the story deck gives you. So let's take a look at the story mat, and we'll see how the turn plays out. So I'm going to open up my deck of cards again. I'm going to pull out story cards. Oh, okay. These are story cards 65 to 128. So these aren't separated in any way in particular. So I'm just going to use those. So let's say this is my story deck for this scenario. It's the start of turn 1. So I'm going to lay these out like so. I just pull it and lay them out in order that I draw them. Oh, look here. Based on that, we drew a landmark event that will happen on phase 2, and then nothing for phase 1 or phase 3. But what I look here is the story says that on phase 1 of the turn, I'm allowed to play move orders. Well, you play one card, but I can play a move card or a hide card. So if I was using old Xavier and I had in my hand several cards, I would be hurting because I don't have any moves. Uh-oh. I don't have a move for phase 2. I don't have a move for phase 3. I have no move cards. Well, this is a cruddy draw. But look here. I do have a hide. No problem. I do have a look. No problem. I do have a shoot. No problem. So luckily the cards usually come with 2 potential orders that you could give in that phase. So you're not always stuck with the fact that, oh, these all say move. I don't have any move cards, I'm done. Nope. What this means is I can play a move or a hide. And so when I've got my little soldier thing out for marking down my phases, I might go, okay, I don't have a move, but I have a hide. I do have Xavier on the board to match his dog tag. So what I'm going to do for my phase 1 on my soldier tracker is put a hide action. Here I'm going to put the look because I've only got one look option. I don't have like several to choose from. But then the last phase, again, I don't have a move, but I have shoot. So if I had, again, if this came down to being 2 different soldiers in my hand and only one of the soldiers was on the board, I would want to play the shoot card for the matching soldier I have on the board. It doesn't always work that way. See, this is where the game becomes even more random in what you can do. And some people that I've read like on forums and things, that's an aspect of the game they don't like because, you know, when you play Combat Commander, if I have a shoot, I can play a shoot card if I want. This game limits you a little bit because, again, based on the story elements that are in play, you may or may not be able to play a hide card if you had a hide card. You can only play what's based on these. And in practice, it's actually really not that bad. In fact, they even have a mechanic in place for if you have no matching cards. Let's say these were all move and shoot cards and you had no move or shoot cards. You just simply fill in the cards that you do happen to have a matching order for. Then you just show the opponent, hey, I have no mover hides and no mover look cards. I mean, I do have a hide, but I'm pretending I didn't. You then just discard the cards that don't work for you, and then you have to draw from your action deck until you get a card that matches. I mean, so they've even got a mechanic in case your cards don't match. There's a chance you'll still be able to pull up one. So you can still have an action each phase. And that's pretty much it. Most of the game revolves around the AI. Really, these cards are a great AI for you to help you kind of guide the play. I didn't actually find it too restrictive because one thing that happens is if you or your opponent don't really have cards for a particular phase, then you just move on to the next phase. So the games actually play fairly quickly, and you cycle through the cards fairly often that you're still acting more often than not. I think the only time that we found that there was problems with getting cards we needed was if there was no spotted enemies, we couldn't shoot. And if there was no look opportunities given, we could go an entire turn without being able to look for the enemy. So yeah, it does kind of put some limitations out there, but overall, like I said, as you play the game, it does flow fairly well. And when we hit those points of inactivity, there was usually inactivity for both player, and so you could just move through that phase quickly. So that, I mean, really, that's what comes in the box. Your soldier cards, the standees, the little charts to track your action deck actions for the phase against the story. You got your story chart, you have your soldier card tracker, you've got the map tiles that make up the map based on your scenario, and then, like I said, that box full of these little baggies of soldiers. Now, when I was playing this with my son, this is where we just kind of talk about the game a little bit. He liked this a lot. Even though I totally kicked his butt, he really enjoyed the game. He liked the fact that you're dealing with just a handful of people, because well, when we first played, the mindset is, this is a war game, so we're playing it like a war game. But once he took his first casualty, not when he shot one of the Americans and killed an American, that's the game, right? He's there to shoot at each other. But when he lost his first German unit, he was like, oh my gosh, that's a person, because they're all individually named. They all have their own dog tag. They have their own dog tag serial number. So you're playing with a person, not a historical person, but I'm just saying they're all named. And that's a really neat aspect of the game, which I think I mentioned in the unboxing, or you could be familiar with, is, again, no soldier duplicates. There are characters that come with some of the sets that are specific people, and those will duplicate from box to box in order to do like specific scenarios and things. But in general, just the rank and file soldiers that you buy, none of them duplicate. So if I have Kruger here, for instance, and Kruger gets shot, well, if I was super hardcore, I would throw him away. But yeah, done. This guy no longer exists. So I'd have to buy a whole new soldier to replace him. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I told my son about that. I said, well, hey, you know what? Every time we lose one of these guys, we're going to have to burn them. He was like, no. But what it does lead is to a cool aspect. If we were going to play a campaign we were talking about, start with scenario 1 and work our way through the book. If somebody dies, like if Kruger dies, he's not going to be available for me to purchase when I do scenario 2. So he's out of the game, essentially, until we start the campaign over. So why that's neat is because then you really build some attachment to the people. So when he had his little player aid out, and he's got 6 soldiers on there, he was knowing them by name because he's matching all their action cards to their names. And when that person does die, their action cards don't come out of your draw deck. So every once in a while you'll draw, like if I had Xavier and poor Xavier was shot dead, and I draw Xavier, yeah, I can't do Xavier's special actions, but he can still use that card to activate other people. It's just that you're reminded, oh yeah, I remember when Xavier was shot on turn 2 by a sniper, you know? That also leads to some element and an attachment to your soldiers. It's just a very, very fascinating game system. So if you haven't played this before, I would say, you know, if you've been on the fence about it, I would say check it out. Like, go ahead and get it. If you're a person, if you're one of those folks that absolutely does not like the card-driven games like Combat Commander, I can't say that this would change your mind, to be honest, because it is another card-driven game. And in some respects, maybe a little more restrictive in the orders you can give. So if you're the type of person that likes that kind of complete control over your soldiers, this might not be the path for you. If you know somebody that owns the game, I would say try it out, or at least accept the game for what it is. It's a very small skirmish, 4, 5, maybe 6 people aside. Now it does have rules though that you could have 6-player battles, like 3 people per side. I think you can do 4 versus 4 players because they come with like 4 of these things for, well, I guess that'd be 2 people per side. There's 4 of these, so you could have 2 people per side. They have a scenario in there where you can have like 3 people per side if you had enough stuff to play with. But I would say if you know someone who has the game, you know, play it, try it for yourself, and see if you like it. But I didn't know how I would feel. That's why I went ahead and got this. And turns out that for me, yeah, this is actually pretty fun. I would say the learning curve wasn't too bad. Again, this is kind of the just chit-chatting a little bit. So if you want to stick around and hear what I have to say, please do. Let me zoom out a little bit. The rule book, when I did the unboxing, I said the rule book looked like it would be easy to read and easy to pick up, and I still think that. I actually only read up through the advanced rules. I didn't do anything with specialists because this does have a couple specialists, but I didn't read any of these advanced things, which I'm going to have to because we're going to end up with some equipment and different items here, I think, pretty soon. But just for the basic game, the first couple scenarios, I think if you just read the first part of the rules, you're good. They're not that confusing. I read it, and there really wasn't anything that came up as I didn't know what to do that I couldn't find in the rule book. I did go to Board Game Geek because I like to read the forums and see if people have questions that I didn't think of or run into scenarios. But a lot of the forum stuff is old. There was a lot of activity when the game first came out, but that was years ago, and I think the rules have been updated. Someone said that on the website they had posted a PDF version of the rules, but the website currently doesn't have the rules. I did find in the forums though that someone posted a link to the rules in the archive machine of the internet, and the rules, I guess the latest rules they did have on the website were version 1.1, and that's what came in the game that I bought. So if you buy the game now, you're probably going to have the most up-to-date rules that include any maybe errata or clarifications that came out since the game was released. So this really did answer everything. A couple of the rules did sound kind of weird at first. Tried to swallow down the wrong pipe. But if you, man, when you swallow, make sure you go down the right pipe. Read the rules carefully. Now, when I first read entry areas, I read it to mean that when you come into a designated spot on the map, there will be marked areas. When I first read it, it says, once a unit enters from an entry area, the lettered location may not be used to enter the map by another player, friendly or enemy. The thing that I didn't read was the word another player. Well, I guess that's 2 words. I just read, can't be entered again by either friendly or enemy troops. And I thought, wait a minute, that makes no sense. why couldn't I go into a spot with Americans and then just continue to funnel Americans into that? So I would say when you read the rules through the first time, just pay attention, pay better attention than I did to the intent of the rule, and look for those key words such as another player. So if I'm playing a multiplayer game where it's me and my buddy playing as Americans, and I enter in at, say, this point on the picture of the map, I can keep moving in through that location, but my buddy couldn't, and the enemy players couldn't enter that spot. So I could keep using it, right? So little things that kind of got me at first because I read the rules, things didn't make sense. I had to come back, read it a couple times, and then find that specific key thing. But you know what? That is not a fault of the game or the rules at all. That's just any standard player learning a new game where sometimes you overlook little nuances. But it's in the book. That's the thing, is every question I've had, I've been able to answer in the book. So to me, that's a really good set of rules. It apparently wasn't that way when the game first came out by what I've read on the forums, but I would say now they've had a few years to really get this down. And so if nothing else, I think the rules are pretty spot on. I had no problem playing the game. Now, one thing I did read in the forums is if you do find something where you're not quite sure, don't let that stop your play. And I still think this is good advice for any game. Come up with a ruling of your own, work that out with your opponent, and then maybe go out to the internet after the game and see, you know, maybe is there an answer for it. Because I don't know, I tell you, you get on forums sometimes and people get angry, you know, like, well, was this not play tested? Why would you have the rule written this way? Well, I tell you, these folks do play test their game, and they put a lot of hours into their games to make sure they work right, but there's no substituting releasing a game to the general public and then having potentially thousands of players play your game, and they might come up with stuff you hadn't thought of. Crazy as that may sound, I see that a lot in video games, I see that in other board games. So so I would say just hop in. Oh, and that's where I was getting at. If you're on the fence about the game, I think it's a good dive. But again, if you don't like card-driven games because of the limitations of the control of your troops, I can't say that this would change your mind. Maybe because it's got a lot of structure to it and some story elements to it. You know, if you approach the game from that point of view, you might actually like it. Again, I definitely would try to find someone who has it and play it. Well, let me show you what else I'm working on. Now, you do get those cardboard standees, but what I'm doing is I'm grabbing up, I got a bunch of 15mm people I bought from, like, for Flames of War and playing battle group miniature games. So what I'm doing is I am taking my 15mm Germans and Americans, and I'm sticking them on the extra little cardboard that comes with each soldier. That way, because the soldiers miniature games comes with 20mm figures, these are 15. Recommended for the game is actually 10mm soldiers. I just didn't want to buy any 10mm soldiers, and I've already got these 15mm soldiers, so why not use 15mm soldiers? If I get the vehicle expansions, I don't know what scale the vehicles are in. I would assume they're 20mm scale, because the miniatures game uses 20, which is fine, because if I needed to, I could just use my 15mm tanks and vehicles in this game. I don't know how that would work out, because I have not got a vehicle expansion yet. I was just looking ahead, because I really didn't feel like buying a whole bunch of 10mm stuff. And I tell you what, the physical map that you play on after you assemble your squares and things, those don't take up a lot of space, but when you add in your player board stuff on each side of your map, the game still takes up quite a bit of a footprint. So I don't know if I could really comfortably play the 20mm version of the game. So that's why I wanted to go smaller scale. So hopefully 15mm would still let me enjoy some miniature aspects of the game, even with the quote-unquote the board game version. Well, anyway, I think I've talked your ears off for quite a bit. So hopefully you've learned something. Maybe you've had some experiences with Seargeants and you want to share, please do. If you have questions, let me know. But I'll let you go. If you really truly did watch this the whole way, thank you. That's amazing. I don't know how long people actually average watch these videos for, but if you're one of the ones that actually takes time to watch these through, I really do appreciate that. You know, I make this content mostly just for me to share my thoughts. It's like a vlog, but if there are other people out there who enjoy and then participate, I love reading the comments from folks. So if you find this of use or of interest, please let me know. I'll still put videos up, but if you have things that you specifically want to see, let me know, and I'll see if I can, you know, discuss that with you some more. A lot of people have been asking for playthroughs of old games I've got, like a lot of stuff I have, and I tell you, new games come out all the time. It's sometimes really hard to find time to go back and play old stuff when I still have new games I'm trying to get through. But again, keep asking. I definitely want to get back to my old games too. But yeah, this is just one of the new ones. Yeah, and my son, let me tell you one last thing about this game. When I told my son, in addition to all these unique soldiers, he said, well, how do you get more unique soldiers? I said, well, they sell soldiers. You can buy machine gun teams, I think there's a sniper team. You can buy additional troops, and you know, you have more individual soldiers. And he was like, that is so cool. So I'm hoping at Origins that Lost Battalion Games is there at Origins, and I'm going to see what I can pick up. Might not get a whole bunch, but I would definitely love to grab a couple German units, a couple American units, and you know, bring more stuff to the table. Just the base game, though, I didn't show you the scenario book, but the base game itself comes, I think it's 26 scenarios. Forest Edge. Yeah, it's 26 scenarios. I mean, that's a pretty big map there. Plus, the way that the game, because it's that randomized card-driven system, no two games will ever play the same way. I've played Scenario 1 a couple different times now with my kid. I've tried playing solo, and it's a different experience every single time. One last thing I'll show you, promise this will be last, is mention that you could buy like equipment. There's a lot of equipment you can purchase to customize your troops. So again, when they give you points to spend on people or equipment, you can actually have quite a few choices of things you can purchase. So you can buy that 5 pieces of gear for Sergeant First Class Xavier and just really kit him out with stuff, or spread it around some different soldiers. So there's a lot here. It'll be very, very difficult for you to say that each game plays the same. You can play that one scenario 4 or 5 times till you feel real comfortable with the rules. I'll tell you what, I think we felt pretty good with the rules after about 2 games. We said, you know what, we think we got this. So yeah, I'm going to see if we can do a playthrough one day. Okay, I promise that's it. Thanks for hanging out, and I will talk to you later. Bye.